Welcome to another episode of Alter Life. Happy to be with you again on this beautiful day. Hope you're enjoying this moment wherever you are. And I'm looking forward to diving into today's topic of detoxification 201, really the next level of your understanding to empower you in your detoxifying lifestyle. And while this is 201, building on the information that we covered last week in detoxification one-on-one, that mini masterclass covering the physiology and the requirements nutritionally for detoxification, this is actually more fundamental in terms of importance. This information that we're going to be covering today, how really everything hinges on this process and the balancing of your nervous system. And while this is 201, this really should be considered first, or at least along with everything that we discussed in last week's episode. But last week's was a little bit more basic in terms of the content, more common sense, I should say. We need vitamins, we need minerals, we need nutrients to support the liver in carrying out these detoxification pathways. We need a hydrated body in order to shuttle out toxicity from our system. And the other thing that we covered last week was rule number one of detoxification, which is simply to avoid bringing toxins into your body, which is impossible. But, doing our best to mitigate toxin exposure is super important. So today we're going to be building on that foundation, and we're going to be supporting you in understanding how to support yourself in regulating your nervous system and flipping the switch that allows your system to be in that state of relaxation that promotes optimal digestion digestion and detoxification, as well as regeneration and healing in general. It's all connected to the state of your nervous system, which is shifting moment to moment. Excuse me. All right, let's get in by kicking things off with the quote of the day. I've got a couple for you today. The first one is, the autonomic nervous system, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Autonomic nervous system is the lens through which we interpret the world, and the body reacts accordingly. This is from Dr. Stephen Porges, who is known for his teachings around what's known as the polyvagal theory. And he's got another quote that I found, which is really good. 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers, we're going to be talking about the vagus nerve as well, spoiler alert, 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers send information from the body to the brain. And the body teaches the brain how safe it is to heal. I'm going to read that again. 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers send information from the body to the brain. The body teaches the brain how safe it is to heal. So this is really interesting, right? The vagus nerve, for those who don't know, is the main nerve associated with the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty details relating to this vagus nerve and how to support it. But the interesting thing to me that this quote hits on is that it's a two-way highway, and most of the information that's carried in this huge vagus nerve that connects every vital organ of our body, most of the information is actually going from the body to the brain, even though it's a cranial nerve going from the brainstem. We think about cranial nerves mainly carrying information to the body, but they are all two-way streets. But this specific nerve, the vagus nerve, is carrying information from your body to your brain, essentially telling your brain how your body's doing. So this is pretty fascinating. So the message here, and we'll be getting into it, is if we create a body that's relaxed, then we can send that message of relaxation, of peace, of groundedness. We can send that message to the brain, which then downstream effects regulate everything that we're doing in terms of our physiologic self-healing capacity. All right, now let's talk about how stress, beating around the bush here. The fact of the matter is we're talking about stress and physiologic stress and how stress blocks detoxification. And we like to discuss stress and relaxation in terms of the branches of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system, I always remember, autonomic is automatic. It's all the things that our body is doing and regulating beyond our conscious control and input. It's your heart rate, heartbeats, your blood pressure, your digestive system, and your detoxification pathways, as well as pretty much every other system and process that's carried out in your beautifully brilliant, perfectly whole and complete, healthy, vital body. And this autonomic nervous system has two branches. Maybe you're familiar with the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch. And of course, when we're talking about stress and the stress system blocking detoxification pathways, we're talking about the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And before we go any deeper, I think it's also helpful to understand that while we do discuss sympathetic and parasympathetic as if it's really a black and a white sort of fundamental switch, and in some ways it is. However, in our waking hours, when we're awake and going about our lives, we are living in some sort of gray area in terms of some amount of sympathetic nervous system activity keeping us alert and awake, and some amount of parasympathetic activity keeping us grounded and relaxed. That being said, when we are sleeping, parasympathetic nervous system activity heavily dominates, right? And that's why sleep is so important, when especially deep sleep. That allows parasympathetic nervous system to gain control and to promote all of the regenerative processes that are fundamental to our health when we sleep. So let's talk about what stress, and specifically what chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system is doing to our body. And maybe before we cover this, I do want to just hit briefly on the point that when I'm talking about stress, when I'm using the terminology stress here and now today, I'm talking about physiologic stress. I'm not talking about necessarily psychological stress, which can be translated into the body into physiologic stress. We're going to be covering psychological stress in other conversations, and specifically next week when we talk about the mindset that promotes detoxification. But just, I'm staying pretty physical when I'm using the term stress. It's not like an etherical, emotional sort of thing. It's just the effects in your body, right? Which, of course, stressful emotions can be translated into stressful effects and impacts on your body via the brain-body connection and the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. So you probably are familiar with some of these things that are happening with that physiologic stress response and the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Things like elevation of stress hormones, quote unquote, cortisol, adrenaline, etc. The shutting down of blood going to vital organs like your liver, and that's because blood is shunted to the periphery so that you can literally have access to your muscles to get you out of harm's way. That is, by the way, the way in which we are wired with the sympathetic nervous system is to support us in surviving during times of stress, during times of when we're in life-threatening situations, right? So also it's helpful to understand that this stress response, the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, calls upon tons of nutrients, and nutrients like antioxidants and vitamins and minerals. And stress, therefore, depletes our nutritional reserves. And it goes without saying that most people are already in a nutritional deficit of vitamins and minerals. So if they're not eating and drinking enough vitamin and mineral and phytonutrient rich foods, and they're also in a stressful state, then they're going to be really in a hole in terms of nutritional nutrients available to carry out fundamental tasks in your body, such as detoxification. Remember last week we talked about phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification pathways, and all of those vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients that carry out those processes as cofactors to those enzymes. Well, if we're chronically stressed, we're simply in a deficit of nutrients, and we don't have the reserves to carry out detoxification, which frankly is not a prioritized task when it comes to our survival. So nutrient depletion is a big one when it comes to activation of sympathetic stress response. Also, the suppression of bile flow and digestive enzymes and stomach acid, and also peristalsis, or the movement of our intestines. And that's essentially leading to the fact that our digestive system is fundamentally shut down or not really functioning, right? Again, because digestion, which is very closely tied with detoxification and excretion. Remember, the primary ways that we eliminate toxins from the body is through the bowels, flush them down the toilet. So if we're not digesting foods and we're not releasing bile that's required to move toxins from the liver into the intestines and then fundamentally through the intestines and into the toilet, if those processes are sluggish or stagnant, then we're going to be accumulating toxins or not releasing the toxins that are stored and we're exposed to. So also the degradation of kidney filtration, kidney function, as well as pretty much every vital process, like I already talked about. But in the context of this detoxification conversation, you can see how all of these things lead to the potential accumulation of more toxins in your body, or at the very least, the lack of excretion of those toxins via digestive system and via breakdown in your liver and so forth. But all that being said, we covered all these effects of the sympathetic stress response. All that being said, I think it's very important to just hit the pause button right here and just remind you not to stress about stress. We've already covered in prior episodes how your relationship and understanding or misunderstanding of your body really sets the foundation for your experience of health or disease. So if you're thinking about all these quote unquote negative effects of stress, and then you're fearing all these negative effects of stress, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm stressed, then it's very more likely to manifest all of these negative effects. So we can approach this information and take in this information from an empowered place, a place trusting your body's innate intelligence and wisdom and self-healing capacity, and using this information to shift your orientation, shift your relationship in a productive, empowering sort of way. Let's talk about the lesson of the day. And this one is a big one. This one is big and also broad and ambiguous, but the lesson of the day is to do less. Do less. And if we're doing less, what are we doing? Hopefully we're being more. I think it's pretty cool that we're human beings, and we are human beings, and we are not human doings. And so much in this world is called upon us to do. And I think that it's super empowering and important in terms of staying grounded and connected with purpose and presence and living life to the fullest. Living life to the fullest doesn't mean doing more, at least in my experience. And, you may disagree. You may feel like you've got this huge to-do list and checking things off as your life's purpose. But I'll tell you what, in my experience thus far, I have found that the more present I am with what's now, the more the to-do list kind of fades away. And like a lot of things on the to-do list aren't important. And that being said, when I am more present and focused on being more and doing less, then when I do the things, I can do so from a more peaceful, grounded, trusting sort of state where I'm not feeling overwhelmed and spread thin and, out of my element. And I'm just more present with the flow of life and wisdom and stepping into my creative full potential. So take that for what it's worth. Lesson of the week, doing less and being more. And let me know if that hits, if that resonates, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe you are a human doing and I am a human being. But in any event, let's continue the conversation talking about this nervous system that we've got that regulates everything that our body is doing. And we covered the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And of course, that leads us to now cover the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And the sympathetic branch, again, is associated with that stress response, the stress hormones, the essentially mobilizing energy and resources away from the vital organs and the regenerative, digestive, detoxifying processes, and more into the survival mode, right? So the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system is the opposite of that. So it's turning on all of the processes. It's moving the blood back to the core vital organs of our body. And it's turning on all of the processes of detoxification and digestion and kidney filtration and lymphatic flow and blood flow in a healthy sort of way that promotes repair, regeneration, detoxification, right? So I already mentioned how we are living in this gray area of, I think it's easy to think like, oh yeah, I'm just in the sympathetic nervous system state. Well, yeah, like most people are to some degree, but most people are also in a parasympathetic state. So back to this understanding, I guess my message is to support you in trusting your body's self-balancing state and remind you that if you were in a sympathetic stress state like all the time, you'd like be dead, right? Like you'd be burning the candle and there would be nothing left. So you do have the capacity to be in a parasympathetic nervous system state, even if you feel like, oh my gosh, I've been stressed my whole life, and your body like this. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is the parasympathetic nervous system state is actually your default state of being. And that being said, most people, especially in our world today, are tuned more towards the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, tuned more towards stress. But even though we're tuned more towards stress, and the way I see it is a lot of people have become physiologically dependent and addicted to the molecules of stress, and that becomes kind of their new normal, so to speak. Despite that being the case, your default state is still the relaxed, repaired, detoxifying state of the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. So we can connect with that default state of being. And the best way to do that is to focus on resting and relaxing. It goes without saying, right? And specifically focus on optimizing sleep. That's when our parasympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system is doing what it does. So yeah, just to cover kind of some of the specifics of the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system, again, it's all the opposite of the sympathetic. So rather than the blood going to our periphery, the blood is going back to our core vital organs. Our digestive processes are turned on. That includes the production of enzymes, the release of enzymes and bile, the production of stomach acid that allows us to break down things when we're eating, and the movement of our intestines, moving food as well as toxins through our bowels and into our toilet. So we've probably had the experience of, being in a quote unquote stress state and not going to the bathroom. Like that's kind of very normal. I know for me, for example, if I'm traveling, I usually don't have a bowel movement while I'm traveling. I mean, there's rare occasions that I do, but I'm like in a more of a tense state thinking and taking care of all the things. And then it's like, it's without a doubt, like whenever I get home from a day of travel, within like 10 minutes, I'm on the toilet, like releasing what has been held up, without giving too much more information, but you get the idea. So that's very normal, right? So anyways, that's normal, and I would say healthy to have that connection with, okay, my parasympathetic nervous system is now turned on. So that's, of course, a big thing that our parasympathetic nervous system is doing, is digesting, but also moving blood to the liver to carry out all of the detox pathways, the phase 1 and the phase 2 detoxification processes. And in terms of nutritional access to nutritional reserves, if we're not in that stressful sympathetic state, then we have more access to the nutrients that are required to carry out detox, as well as every other process and function in your body. Now let's talk about tuning your nervous system more towards the parasympathetic branch, which is, of course, what this conversation is all about. I just wanted to cover in depth, or at least medium depth, the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. But the most important information here is what I'm going to be covering now, which is supporting you in staying aligned more and more connected with the default state of your nervous system and unplugging from stressful physiology and plugging into relaxed physiology, flipping that switch, so to speak, so that you can have access to parasympathetic nervous system and detoxification. Because, of course, back to kind of the main point of this episode here, detoxification 201 is that you need to be in that parasympathetic state to support your body in cleansing, releasing, and excreting toxins from your body. So this brings us to talk about the vagus nerve, which is the primary nerve that we talked about in the quote of the day, relating to your parasympathetic nervous system. The nerve comes from your brainstem and goes down either side of your neck here, and then goes into all of your vital organs, including your stomach, your gallbladder, your pancreas, your liver, your intestines, your kidneys, et cetera, right? And that vagus nerve, like I said in that quote, is carrying information predominantly from your body to your brain and sending the message of, is the body okay? Or is the body in a state of stress? I'm going to take a breath here just to catch myself and come back into my parasympathetic state. So there's a lot of things that the vagus nerve does. It goes without saying, but I want to focus the conversation around where you have the maximal control of your vagus nerve, and that is without a doubt your breath. Your breath is an autonomic process, meaning that you breathe regardless of whether you're consciously aware of it, right? When you're asleep, you're breathing, and that's, of course, a good thing. That being said, your breath is the one autonomic function in the body that you can consciously override. And the vagus nerve innervates all of the vital organs and also innervates the diaphragm, which is, of course, the primary muscle for breathing. And most people, it goes without saying, I don't know how far you've delved into quote unquote breath work, but most people are not breathing with their full lungs. Most people are not diaphragmatically breathing. They're not belly breathing. Most people are also breathing through the mouth, which is I don't know about most people, but that's very common. So there's all these issues with breathing that can be and should be consciously overridden to support the body in activating the vagus nerve, telling the brain, hey, everything's okay. So if, there have been studies done, and if you are, if you do breath work and you breathe just shallowly and rapidly, I don't know what your normal breath is, but if you override whatever your normal breath is and breathe shallowly and rapidly, then that will lead to stressful physiology, because that shallow, rapid breath is essentially not activating the vagus nerve. So you're not telling your body that you're okay. So your body thinks like, okay, what's going on here? I'm not getting that grounded, relaxed signal from the body. Or from the vagus nerve, from the diaphragm. So what's going on here? So the body stays on edge. Here I am activating my diaphragm once again. So the key here, and I know that there's like all these memes floating around, or at least there was the common one that was like, keep calm and breathe, right? Keep calm and breathe. And that's true to some extent if you are breathing properly. So I'm kind of, double clicking on this breath topic here because it's super important. And rather than just tell you to keep calm and breathe, I want to tell you more specifically how to breathe, and specifically for people who feel like they're a little dysregulated in terms of the balance of their nervous system here. So really the message should be keep calm and exhale. So when you exhale completely and you lengthen the duration of your exhalation, you're essentially contracting your diaphragm so that you're sending that signal back to the brain. Okay, I'm fully okay. So focusing on diaphragmatic breathing, yes, but specifically focusing on lengthened exhalations, full and complete exhalations. And of course, that's not like all the time. If you're if you're running or on the bike or swimming, you probably don't want to be diaphragmatic belly breathing and lengthening your exhalations. That's going to maybe make you feel a little bit more stressed and out of breath. And but the point is, when you're hanging out, when you're relaxing, when you're sitting on the couch, when you're lying in bed, when you're going about your day, whenever you have the awareness of, again, I'm a human being, not a human doing. When you're focusing on your being, you can also shift your focus to, how am I breathing? Where am I exhaling to? How can I let go of that full exhalation and activate my diaphragm and tell my brain and my body, I'm okay. And maybe that also comes with a little bit of that self-talk affirmation, which also reinforces, yeah, you are okay. So that's the real big thing to shift the state of our nervous system and the state of our vagus nerve and activate the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. That being said, there are some other things to consider when we're talking about lifestyle, behavioral, practical things in your daily life to shift your nervous system. But breath is huge. Breath is, like, I would say, 80 to 90% the most powerful and important one. The other ones on this list here, yeah, still fun to play around with and consider how we can do these other things. They're all important, but breath is, I guess what I'm trying to say here, breath is the immediate most powerful trigger to the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system via turning on that vagus nerve signal to the brain. And you can, if you wear a heart rate monitor or measure heart rate variability, you can, in an instant, like literally, like in an instant, see that shift of your heart rate or of your parasympathetic nervous system through focusing on that deep or that full diaphragmatic exhalation. All right, that being said, that kind of ties a ribbon and bow on that breath work category for now. I hope to talk a lot more about breath in the future. But that being said, some other tools for vagus nerve activation and parasympathetic nervous system activation include sound, specifically humming and singing. And to that note, also vagal massage. There are also, I was talking with someone who has experimented with, I haven't experimented with the electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve, which relaxes the body too by activating the vagus nerve directly. But in terms of like easier, less technology ways of activating that vagus nerve, just humming, singing, and vagal massage, mechanically kind of like moving that vagus nerve, and it activates and sends messages to the brain again. Hey, everything's good here. Also, grounding, being barefoot outside. There's so many things that happen when we're just barefoot outside connected with nature. But one of those things is essentially discharging any disharmonious electromagnetic frequencies that we might be exposed to that are creating some stress in our field, so to speak, and reconnecting us with our default natural state from a more energetic level, but also not energetic like unmeasurable, a measurable energetic perspective. Also, Circadian rhythm health is very important for the health and balance of our autonomic nervous system. And the best things that we can do to regulate our circadian rhythm is get exposure to sunlight early in the day, and then be mindful of our exposure to light and screens and such later in the day, and setting your alarm for kind of a wind down routine at the end of the day so that we can get in that rhythm. And getting in that rhythm helps us to maintain optimal sleep hygiene and sleep habits, and also sleep depth, so that we can have that balanced and regulated nervous system. Uh, Also, movement, and I'm not talking about necessarily physical exercise, so to speak, but I'm talking about just like moving your body. And um, there's a whole practice called trauma release exercises, and it's a big category that I'm certainly not an expert in. I've got some experience with, but the idea is that you want to like let your body move, and so like when we go about life and we feel stress, so often the response to a stressful thought or feeling or circumstance is like tensing up. And if we observe nature and observe animals in their natural habitat, and if we even observe babies who have not been programmed, we see that when there is stress, when there is, quote unquote, trauma or anything like that, we kind of just like shake it off. And so dancing, shaking, walking, moving, doing things that kind of invite kind of the natural release and movement and wiggles and yoga and tai chi, qigong. Again, I'm not a super expert in any of this, but the point is that you just want to like let things move through you, for the purpose of releasing tension in your body and allowing yourself to more deeply and closely activate that parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. All right, covered a lot there. I hope that rapid fire things to do to activate your nervous system wasn't activating too much of the doing part of you. But the big take home message is to trust the process and to lean into any of one of these things in a trusting, balanced, grounded sort of way, which leads us to the challenge of the day, which is to do this. Do one thing. Don't overthink it. Don't overdo it. But my recommendation would be to lean into, I guess, whatever you're called to lean into. But my recommendation would be to lean into the breath practice, because that's, again, the most direct, most powerful, most activating. And the way that I relate to it is it's kind of like going to the gym. It's breath specifically. It's your diaphragm is a muscle, and most people are not really using it fully. So it's kind of like relearning how to use your diaphragm and physically strengthening your diaphragm. And the best thing that we can do, the easiest thing that we can do, I should say, there are all sorts of breathwork techniques, but for the purpose of activating the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, just focusing on the lengthened diaphragmatic exhalation. And I'm going to do another one here since I've just been talking so much. That being said, in addition to the lengthened diaphragmatic exhalation, I just kind of connected with the remembrance and the insight. Allowing yourself to pause at the end of the exhalation also kind of squeezes the diaphragm a little bit. There are other things to do to squeeze the diaphragm, like more physically, mechanically. But the point is, in this like introduction to that sort of breath practice, is to just pause and allow that next breath to come when it does. So yeah, that's the challenge of the day, is to play around with this breathwork technique, or any of the other things that can be used to support the grounding and balancing and regulation of our parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, such as sound and humming, grounding, circadian rhythm and sunlight exposure, and moving, shaking, wiggling, letting things go. So, that all being said, as we close today's episode, I want to remind you, if you want a little bit of support in this detoxification conversation specifically, the next thing that you can do to take advantage of is the last Alter Health cleanse. And yes, we've been doing this cleanse for years and years, and we are about to host our final Alter Health cleanse. It's symbolizing a big shift at Alter Health, and you can learn more at www.alter.health/cleanse. This final cleanse is just $49, and it is not only nutritional in nature, supporting you with recipes and guidelines to follow to give your body all of the nutrients and resources and hydration to carry out the detox pathways. But this cleanse is also going a little bit deeper, inviting you into more practical application of some of these other things, as well as a mental, psychological application of some of these other things that are just as powerful or maybe more powerful than all the physical things that we can focus on. So anyways, if you're called to do that, you can sign up now at www.alter.health/cleanse. Just $49, no discount code required. Hope to see you in there. The cleanse is kicking off on April 25th. All right, that's it for now, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week for the third and final part of this 3-part series around detoxification and your health. All right, that's it for now. Peace and love.